Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel we post writing tips, unboxings, book hauls, book reviews and the occasional vlog. And today I have another book review for you and it is Christmas Days by Jeanette Winterson. This was the first book I actually read in the book club myself and Matt have joined with the wonderful Owen from Bookish, which is an independent bookstore around Abergavenny and Crookcowell. He is actually also an author, which I don't know, by the time this comes out, will I or will I not have read one of his books? In any case, if I have not, then just to let you know, Owen B. Lewis, Vulnerable Voices. This is one of his books. He's a very lovely person, so if you do see his book, please check it out. If I have done a book review on this, I will link that above now. But for today, we are reviewing Jeanette Winterson's Christmas Days. This is a bunch of short stories by Jeanette Winterson, who is an author I've never actually read, but her writing style from reading this is very interesting and I really enjoyed, so maybe one I will read again. But as always with my book reviews, I'll read you guys the blurb first. Before we get into that, don't forget if you like what you see to subscribe to this channel. Your continued support means a lot, so thank you guys so much. Alright, blurb time. At Christmas, Jeanette Winterson makes her own mince pies and cheese straws. Half the price, twice as good, and as fast as going to the shops to buy them. See the recipes inside. She has invented her own traditions for a happy Christmas and believes that anyone can. It's not about money, it's about imagination. Her advice is this: go for a walk with a flask of coffee and a piece of Christmas cake in your pocket. Think about the good things in your life and in the world. No bad things on this walk. Then come home, light the candles, sing the carols, and have yourself a merry little Christmas time. This has a lot of great reviews on it. The Guardian says, Winterson's winter tales unfailingly succeed in their endeavour to leave you aglow. We have stylist, packed with charm and beautifully illustrated, a literary wonderland. Inside, perfect winter treat, a beautifully illustrated, spooky and funny book of Christmas stories and recipes from one of Britain's best loved writers. For years, Jeanette Winterson has written a new story at Christmas time, and here she brings together 12 of her brilliantly imaginative, funny and bold tales, along with 12 delicious recipes for the 12 days of Christmas. Sunday Times says, Christmas Days is a cracker, sharp, funny and moving. Sunday Telegraph, an enchanting collection of recipes and short stories. And The Observer, these funny, beguiling tales pack some serious literary clout. So as I said at the beginning, this is a bunch of short stories by Jeanette Winterson. I'm going to try to do this as spoiler free as possible. We have a couple of quotes. I'll go through it story by story and just say a little bit about each one, then give my overall review at the end. I will warn if I believe there are any spoilers, but I'll try my best to make it as spoiler free as possible. First story in this is Christmas Tide, and I have a quote from page 7 from this one. But the ghost story as a phenomenon is a 19th century phenomenon. One theory is that the spectres and apparitions claimed in so many sightings are a result of low-level carbon monoxide poison from gas lamps. It does cause fuzzy, drowsy hallucinations. Add in the thick fogs and plenty of gin and it starts to make sense. This is both educational and funny. So this book opens with a brief history on Christmas and how it happened, the various different religions and life events basically that made this holiday, how it's celebrated in various different forms, how traditions were formed, how they've changed. When I first started, honestly, I found that quite jarring. Until that quote I just read you, that quote made it more palatable for me. I was concerned that it was going to be a history book, which I love history. I'm not that great at reading it. Momentarily concerned. It was just an introduction and a history on Christmas. It's not what it was overall, so I was pleasantly happy. First short story is Spirit of Christmas, and I have a quote from this, page 13. It was the night before Christmas and all over the house nothing was stirring because even the mouse was exhausted. I love that because it's making a more modern take on a very classic beginning of a novel that we all know so well. It was night before Christmas and all in the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. All know that line. So I love how Jeanette Winterson used that and then flipped it to make it a little bit more modern. The first story really reminded me of A Christmas Carol. Now, one thing I did find in this is that Jeanette Winterson, I think she has taken a lot of Christmas stories, myths, legends, tales that we all know really well and modernized them. So this first one really read like A Christmas Carol to me, and it's a couple who are visited by a child apparition who claims to be the spirit of Christmas, and bit by bit, like in A Christmas Carol, they learn the true meaning of Christmas. So really Christmas Carol-y, but I did enjoy it. We then have a recipe. Now, one thing this book does is we have a short story, recipe, short story, recipe. But the recipes aren't just recipes. Each recipe comes with a mini autobiographical story, either about herself or about another author or person that she knows. And these are actually quite interesting, and also gives you other authors that you maybe haven't read before that could be intriguing to read. But the first recipe is for a mince pie, and it's quite fun, and it goes into the history of not owning a fridge, which is something in modern life we don't think about because we all own a fridge, but at some point here in the UK people really didn't have fridges. They weren't that common because you just put it somewhere cold. So it's interesting to hear about a family working without a fridge. Intriguing. The second story is The Snow Mama. If the title doesn't give it away, for me this was a modern take and a different take on the snowman, which is a very traditional, I think it's a UK based Christmas tale. I believe it's UK because it's tragic, and all UK tales are tragic. Do we just like sorrow? The John Lewis advert every year? We just sad nation. But The Snow Mama, I love this tale. I much preferred it to the first one. It just filled me with so much love and learning, and you learned about people going through depression, about people being burnt out through the eyes of a child and the Snow Mama who comes to help. And I really enjoyed it. I felt so wholesome. Very nice story. The second recipe is for red cabbage, and we learn a little bit about another author. It's very autobiographical, so it's quite interesting. Third story is Dark Christmas. It is a winter ghost story. Now, we all like a ghost tale. Now, if you haven't seen, I did a review on the Haunting Season, which is a collection of short horror stories. I actually found the ghost stories in this Christmas book far scarier than the Haunting Season. I really enjoyed them in here. But this one is a winter ghost story about someone who travels to a cottage for Christmas. Now, I've never actually traveled for Christmas. I've lived abroad, so I've been abroad during Christmas. That's because I lived there. I've never traveled somewhere. So it was fascinating to me throughout this how many people actually do go away for Christmas. So it's a whole other side to Christmas that I've never really thought about before. But they go to this cottage, and believe me, they get far more than they wanted. It was interesting and leaves a question, and I honestly wondered if two people who were in this were also ghosts. I'm not going to say who, but the question was there. The third recipe was for custard, and a bit of a very sad story for this one. We then have Christmas in New York, which is quite heartwarming. It's about someone who hates Christmas and someone who loves Christmas, and the slow development of them teaching them about Christmas. And it's quite wholesome, quite nice. Didn't stick in my head. It wasn't anything special for me, but it was sweet. We then have another ghostly one. It's called The Second Best Bed. I do have a query on this one from page 151 to 152. I was a little confused with midwife not being classed as a doctor because they are medical for me. I know a doctor's a doctor and midwife is a midwife, but it was like this hierarchy, which I didn't quite agree with. But I did really enjoy the ghostly tale, and it leaves you with this question mark still, like the first ghost story. We then have a recipe for salmon and champagne. What I liked about this one is it's not really making anything. It's just about having salmon and champagne. But she gives the option for various price ranges because she herself has had varying degrees of wealth throughout her life. And on page 110, the ritual is a way of altering time, by which I mean a way of pausing the endless intrusion of a busy life, which I really enjoyed. The next story was The Mistletoe Bride. It was a revenge story, and I'm all here for it. Again, this seemed like one of a story that is known, but a different take on it. I believe the original story, it's not revenge that this person, it's tragic. Jeanette Winterson gets revenge, and I love that revenge. We then have a gravel axe recipe and another insight into another author's life. We then have O'Brien's First Christmas. This one, it was a nice story, but I did find it quite artificial. It was the idea that she got new hair and then suddenly her life was great. It's a common trope used, particularly in rom-coms, where you get a makeover and your life changes. It felt artificial to me, but I know it's a very popular trope, so I know a lot of people like it. We then have a snippet from her autobiography, which is about Shakespeare & Co., which is a bookshop in Paris that I recently saw on a Bookstagrammer's YouTube channel, Beth Bartholomew. I love their channel. They went there, and you're not allowed to film inside, so no booktuber can ever get images inside that shop. But I really want to go now because I did not know that place is not only a bookshop, but a place many famous authors and writers have actually stayed and worked and lived there. And I do have a quote from this, which is page 175. He didn't look pleased to see me. In fact, he threw a book at my head. George, what's she doing in my apartment? Who's she? Sylvia, she's a writer Writer, Daddy, Jeanette Winterson. George looked pleased and he put down the next book he was preparing to propel at me. That just has so much character in that one quote. I loved it. We then have The Christmas Cracker. Oh my god, the story was so sweet. It is about like a stray dog, and again it was sort of about the true meaning of Christmas, and I really liked it. We then have a mulled wine recipe, and Jeanette Winterson decides that a mulled wine is for a cold day, not a hot party, and I totally agree. We then have a ghost story. It was an interesting story, but the ending fell a bit flat for me. I wanted to know what happened, and you don't get that resolution here. But if it is based on a true story, then no one yet knows what happened, so it kind of makes sense to not have that resolution. We then have a turkey biryani recipe, and then we have the silver frog. Now this one really felt like Matilda, and on page 240 I do have a quote. The smaller children hoped that when they grew up, they would marry a roast potato dressed in gravy. I just love how sweet that quote is, and that imagination of a child. They got a Christmas dinner and all they could dream about was roast potatoes and gravy. So sweet. But it was a Matilda story. I did quite enjoy it. It was very fun, fanciful, silly. Great. We then have Cheese Krispies recipe, and I have another quote from this page 246. Why am I porter in this shit? It's a good New Year question. The idea that New Year you get rid of crappy memories and celebrate New Year's Day is very nice. So me personally, I don't like staying up that late. I like sleep and I like enjoying the day in full, which you can only really do when you're not knackered and hungover. So I love the idea of celebrating New Year's Day more than New Year's Eve. But I also loved how her friends have varying traditions, and one of her friends writes down the crap from the year that she wants to let go of and then burns them. And that seems really powerful to me, and something I quite fancy taking up. Because it's why should you carry that crap around? And yeah, I really enjoyed that. We then have The Lion, the Unicorn and Me. It was a version of the nativity play, which I quite enjoyed. It was okay. We then have a steak sandwich recipe, and at this point I really am loving the New Year's stories, and I think I might need to try out some of these traditions next year. And the final story is The Glow Heart. It's so sweet. It's a story dealing with loss and learning to live again after a major loss in your life, whilst also moving on. It was very beautiful and heartwarming. And the final recipe is for fish cakes, and the final story in it was about life being what it is. There is no completion to this, and I felt that was really true to life, because there's no completion on life, and things happen, things change, and life continues and moves on. All in all, it's a group of short stories. Obviously, they're all written by one author, so unlike a lot of short stories where you get a lot of different authors in there, so you get different stories, this is all one author, so obviously they're all going to read quite similarly. But what I did enjoy was each story I did feel was quite interesting. Some I liked more than others, but I did love Jeanette Winterson's voice personally. And obviously Christmas time and December in general is generally very busy for people. There's so many parties, so many family obligations, there's so much to do. So having a book of short stories at hand to read is actually a really good idea, because you can just dip in and out. You don't need to remember things. It made sense to read short stories, so I thought it was a really good suggestion by Owen. One of the people in my book club did do something really sweet, which I thought was really cool, was they, as a family, were reading these stories out loud to one another, so they read one a night to each other as a family, which I thought was really sweet and quite a nice tradition. It's something I've never tried, so it could be something interesting to do, to get a short storybook and to read it out loud. And that gives you a different take, I think, on the stories compared to sitting and reading them by yourself. It makes them more community feel, makes them more Christmassy feel. But overall, I did really like it. I personally didn't think the front cover matched. If you see this, it's all very jolly. And I mean, the book is jolly and it's all about traditions and things. I felt a lot of it was quite serious and a lot of it was based in horror and ghost tales, but it is a very light Christmassy winter read. Out of all the short stories I've read this year, this is the only one I would recommend buying for yourself. The others I recommended, the Haunting Season and the Scandinavian Christmas Tales, I recommended as stocking fillers for book lovers if you wanted to get them something. They weren't ones I would necessarily recommend vastly. This one I would recommend, and I would actually keep on my shelf and reread and dip into. I do want to try some of the recipes, try some of the traditions, and I loved how Jeanette Winterson had this idea that Christmas is about the traditions and that you don't have to keep ones you don't like. You don't have to do the ones that are expected. You can make your own. I mean, I personally have a tradition of I watch the holiday every year. Me and Matt always watch The Hogfather together every year. We do make a Christmas calendar together each year, and we generally do obviously eat mince pies. We sometimes make mincemeat, we don't always, but I think this year we're planning to. But it is about the traditions that you make. Obviously it is difficult because Christmas is so busy, and especially when you're with a partner and you both have families, it can be a balancing act. We alternate Christmases. We'd love to do a Christmas at our own house one year so we can make our own traditions, but each family has different traditions. It's difficult to balance, but making some of your own, priceless. And I did like how Jeanette Winterson had a different take on them. So overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Now, the book club overall, it was 3 out of 5 stars. I kind of bumped it up after I got home because I realised the other ones I sort of gave 3 out of 5 stars and thought this one was better than those. So 4 out of 5 stars. I would recommend getting it for yourself if you're interested in an easy winter read that you can dip in and out of at the Christmas busy time period. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you like to see the things I upload, click that little bell down below. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook and Tumblr. I post my books, pictures, as well as my writing tips and unboxings on there. I hope you all have a great winter holiday, however you celebrate it, and whatever tradition or religious ceremony you follow for it. Please have a great one with your family and friends. Yeah, have a great time. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.